Alright, so what's going on, and welcome back to another video. And today me reacting to Let's Talk Election Senate Prediction. Again, we'll do this for the presidential predictions. Definitely not House predictions, though, because those take forever and generally are a bit boring, compared to the other ones. So, yeah, we're going to get started. So we're not... I skipped through the first 4 minutes because it's kind of, just introduction. So, basically that kind of thing. But now we're going to take a look at the states he's filled. Minnesota, we're going to ignore that for the time being. But the states that he's filled out as safe. For the Democrats, I don't really have a problem with, except for, again, like I mentioned with Red Eagle Politics' video in New Hampshire. I think both Let's Talk Elections and Red Eagle Politics are overestimating by a little bit Shaheen's popularity. I mean, yeah, she's popular, but I don't think she's popular enough to win in a state that was that Donald Trump only lost by 0.4% in 2016. Being able to run up the score, winning by 12%, I think she'll certainly win by 10%, maybe 8%, but not 12%. And then for the Republicans, I do think Kentucky is debatable. I think you can put that as safe if you want to, but it's also likely. I mean, if it's rating in between safe and likely, I guess I'd put it as that. But so far, pretty rational map.
So the state of Minnesota, I'm actually moving down from safe to likely. After a further assessment of the state, I'm going to return to my previous characterization. Now, this is not to say that Lewis in this state could come even close to winning. We are looking at Tina Smith probably winning by 11, 12, 13%. But unfortunately for her, that's not enough for it to be considered safe by my ratings. It's anywhere from 5 to 15% is what is considered likely, and that's where this state ultimately lies. So Minnesota, while completely out of reach for the GOP, is likely for the Democratic Party, just in terms of its margin,
I agree.
not in terms of chances. So that puts the Democrats at roughly 45. Now, Alabama is a state. We're going to actually get into the likely Republican states because I've finished all of the likely Democratic states. That should hint about one of the race rating changes if you remember my old map. But Alaska, Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, which is a flip from 2017. These states are all considered to be likely. I think that these 4 states in particular should be considered likely, just because of the fact that, looking at...
Okay, I'm going to mute that because that's annoying, but yeah.
Mississippi, and looking at Alabama, Mississippi just has a very well-known Democratic candidate, and also the presidential race is slightly narrowing up. I mean, nowhere near where Biden could actually win Mississippi, but it is narrowing up. Alabama has a Democrat incumbent, so you do have to realize that the factor of the incumbency definitely helps. We're going to see Doug Jones probably get 45, 46% of the vote here. As for Alaska, we probably will see Dan Sullivan pull ahead.
I mean, generally good assessment. I mean, I guess my model, I should pull that up right now, actually. My model for the Senate race in Alabama, and I updated it today, so it's very recent, puts Tommy Tuberville up by 11.8. So yeah, that's that's reasonable. The incumbency factor, I do agree, does help Jones. So yeah, we're gonna resume talking about Alaska.
Defeats his independent challenger, and then in Texas, while John Cornyn may seem as if he's worried about his re-election bid, realistically, he has no reason to be worried.
He's not at all.
Jay Hager probably won't even come close, as Biden does to Trump in the state of Texas. So Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, and Alaska, all likely for the GOP.
So yeah, I mean, this does make sense generally. I think you could make the argument for Alaska being lean because of how confident a lot of people are that Al Gross is going to win. And I think Nestler.org puts Gross actually ahead by 8%. So, that's interesting enough, but likely states, so far, I agree with basically everything.
We'll talk about Kansas because, I'm really iffy about Kansas. I've moved it from lean Republican to likely Republican just because we really don't see any substantial data coming out of the state. And
there actually this is a few days old, but there actually is substantial data coming out of Kansas. The latest poll put Bullier up by 4.
It's just very hard for me to characterize this state as anything but likely. I mean, the range is just so high and so low that there are so many possibilities where it could be a 6-point margin of victory or a 12-point margin of victory for the GOP, and that'd still be considered likely. Now, Laura Kelly was a surprise to us all. And Barbara Bouvier might actually be a surprise to us all as well. And I do think that she is individually a very strong candidate, but she just has the detriment of the fact that Donald Trump is on the ballot with her. And it's going to be very difficult for her to try to overcome Roger Marshall riding on the coattails of a president who's expected to win this state by 10, 15%. So for the state of Kansas, for right now, unfortunately for Barbara Willier, I will be characterizing it as likely. That's probably one of the closer likely states out of the bunch. Now, the Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, I like his argument. I think that Roger Marshall is actually going to end up being helped by Donald Trump. There are going to be people who actually would probably vote for Bullier if this was a midterm, but it'll still be closer because of the contested primary, because of Barbara Bullier being a conservative Democrat who is consistently polling ahead of your average Democrat in Kansas, and who's consistently out fundraising. Totally that didn't show up on my screen recorder, and who's consistently out fundraising. Her opponent, and again contested primary, and Roger Marshall was actually expected to lose that primary, so he had to spend all his money on trying to win there. But yeah, I agree with his analysis, except for the part that there's no substantial data. There is substantial data, and it puts Bullier up. The recent poll put her up by 4, although other polls kind of Marshall up by 1 or Marshall up by 2.
Republicans are even. 45-45. I actually did not forget. No, I did forget. Sorry. I actually forgot 2 likely Democratic states, and I don't think these are too surprising. There are the states of Colorado and Arizona. I'm not moving these characterizations until I see anything substantial out of both of these states that actually tell me Cory Gardner is in a competitive position and Martha McSally is in a competitive position. I can actually show you the 538 forecast. If we take a look at Colorado, John Hickenlooper has a 79% chance of victory. In Arizona, Mark Kelly has a 78% chance of victory. The Republican Party should not have renominated or appointed Martha McSally to John McCain's seat, because this is a seat where, the Democratic Party realistically should not have been leading. Had Doug Ducey chosen a correct and a good replacement for John McCain, this race would be Republican.
I don't know about that. Mark Kelly is really popular in Arizona, but again, Martha McSally was a bad choice. She was rejected by voters in 2018, so he makes a good point.
If he had chosen someone in the McCain family or someone who had worked very closely with John McCain and not Martha McSally, this race probably would be a lot less competitive. In fact, leaning towards the GOP. When we're talking about this play, it was such a horrible move on the Arizona GOP's part to nominate someone who had just lost a Senate election. Yes, it was a Democratic wave year, but this year is no different. It's another Democratic wave year. The generic ballot adds up. The national average does even more for the Democrats. Biden is expected to win Arizona. So, all in all, I really think that was just such a horrible play from the GOP, and they are paying the price for it. For Cory Gardner, realistically, he was the Republican incumbent. He won in 2014, defeated a Democrat, but he is likely going to be a one-term senator at most. John Hickenlooper is going to defeat him on Election Day unless something really changes in the final 20 days. Again, day after day, month after month, we always talked about the election will inevitably narrow up. We are 20 days away when a lot of people won't be voting in person, meaning that last-minute shock effect the week before the election won't have the impact that you thought it would. It won't have the same impact as it did in 2016. So Colorado, Arizona, likely Democratic states in the Senate elections, which puts the Democratic Party at 47. For the GOP,
yeah, these are both likely Democratic states. I do think that Mark Kelly is a strong candidate, but I already talked about Arizona. Colorado, it wasn't necessarily a fluke election because things happened for a reason. People didn't randomly just be like, I'm going to vote for Cory Gardner because I feel like it. No, it was because Mark Udall, the incumbent Democrat, ran a bad campaign. It was an anti-establishment year, and Udall was part of the establishment. Like, his family is very establishment. That the Udall family, there are literally Mark Udall from Colorado, Tom Udall from New Mexico. Their father, I think, was also in the Senate. And then also you have to remember, that was a red wave year. This year, like LTE/Ethan says, it's not really shaping up to be a red year or red wave year. It could very well be a blue wave year.
They do have some race rating changes that actually benefit them. The first one is the state of Michigan, which I am moving out from being likely down to lean.
Yeah, I agree with that.
John James has done much better than Donald Trump in this state. And while what we see is the fact that Gary Peters is running even a little bit lower than Joe Biden, John James is getting more of the vote than Donald Trump. So the margins are narrower. Gary Peters is going to need to rely on a Biden victory in order to win this state. Biden has a likely characterization in Michigan. He has a lean characterization. not out of the question, obviously, that both of them win there. It's just a little bit less likely that Michigan goes to the Democrats. I think that what we will see is Gary Peters will run away with the state of Michigan. It just won't be by a large margin, and it won't be likely, as we previously thought. So this race narrows down to being...
Oh my goodness, the ads. Okay.
It still is a seat for the Democrats. It gives them 48, which is an overall net gain of 1 so far from Colorado and Arizona, with a loss in Alabama. But we have 7 toss-up races that will likely make or break the Senate map. Now, we do have some remaining lean characterizations to use. Let me grab a sip of water here because my mouth is... No. Okay, I'm good. I was about to sound really hoarse, but 7 toss-up races. We have North Carolina, South Carolina. Had I told you that 6 months ago, you would have thought I was crazy. Georgia Senate special election. Montana, 6 months ago, you would have thought I was crazy as well. Iowa, and Maine. So these states, 2 in Georgia, the only state with 2 seats up this election, it's competitive. I mean, looking at North Carolina, this is a race where the Republican Party was really hoping that whole sexting scandal with Cal Cunningham would have really hurt him, but
that actually wasn't a sexting scandal. It was romantic talk over. It was basically PG flirting with someone who wasn't his wife. So it is a scandal, but sexting, no.
What we see in a number of data points is that it really helped him. I mean, he was always the favorite to win the race, but prior to that, I mean, his margins have improved. And if we look at the data,
which is really weird,
A+ rated pollsters show Cunningham ahead by 3%. Another A+ rated pollster has him ahead by 4%. An A rated pollster has him ahead 10%. So when we look at a lot of this data, and we see Cunningham lead 3, 4, 6, 10, 6%, with one outlier of being an even margin, which still isn't good for Thom Tillis, this is a very good sign for the Democratic Party, because even following a scandal that otherwise could have hurt another campaign, only 13% of voters in the most recent poll say that that is a disqualifying trait, that this sexting scandal should disqualify Cal Cunningham from serving in the United States Senate. The majority, 51%, say this is an issue for his family and not for the people of North Carolina. And I can guarantee it, probably 90% of that 51% are already voting for Cal Cunningham. So that race should have narrowed up, but there is no data, and there's absolutely nothing indicating that this race has actually narrowed up.
Yeah, he makes a very good point here in that I thought this was going to... I originally said, okay, maybe it'll go back to Till Democrat, but it stayed the same. It stayed at Cunningham still maintains the lead, and in fact, his lead has grown larger, and I don't think that's a result of the scandal, but still, it's people who are saying, okay, this just killed Cunningham, just aren't looking at the data.
The Cunningham campaign has ran internal polling, and they're back like business as usual. Their Twitter ads are running back up. Everything seems to be normal. They haven't really addressed the situation. Now, Kyle Cunningham, I don't think has handled the situation well, but I think the people of North Carolina haven't exactly seen that as a negative attribute in serving in the United States Senate. They may have seen it as negative on his character, but also the Republican Party cannot be one to speak about adultery. And that is something that, the Democratic Party has targeted President Trump on time and time again. And Thom Tillis has said, if Biden wins the election, you should vote for me because I would be a check on a Biden presidency. But that doesn't work. That worked in 2016. There's a reason why in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, both of these states went to the Republican Party in the Senate elections. Had people thought Donald Trump was going to win, so my screen recorder cut out, but I'm back, and we're going to get right back into the predictions. So essentially what I was talking about was these voters that in 2016 thought Hillary Clinton was going to win the presidency. So as a result, they may have voted for Republicans down ballot. Now, this time...
Again, there's no direct evidence of that, but he does make a good point. It's a possibility, but there's no direct evidence of that.
Around, the plurality of Americans believe that Donald Trump is going to win. Despite Biden being up 11 points on the national average and leading in practically every swing state, Georgia, actually just 5 minutes ago, just moved over into the Democratic column on 538's prediction. I mean, looking at Joe Biden's lead, dominating every part of the country, people still expect him to lose. Why? Because people saw the media predictions in 2016. They thought that the polls were 100% wrong, which they weren't.
They really weren't.
That's for another video. I've already made one of those videos. But looking at the American public, a lot of them said, you know what? Looking at the data from 2016, it was wrong. And Hillary Clinton did end up winning the presidency despite the press saying there's no way that Donald Trump comes out of this. When the Huffington Post released the results saying Donald Trump had a 1% chance of the presidency, well, that really ruined their credibility following that. The Princeton election model gave the same exact chance for Donald Trump. In fact, 538 was the only model that gave Donald Trump a realistic shot at the presidency. So when we're looking at, I believe The Economist did as well, actually, but when we're looking at the Senate elections, people are not going to be voting for Tom Tillis and Joe Biden because they don't think that Joe Biden is going to win the presidency. There are so many people here that think that Donald Trump is going to delegitimize the election results and somehow win the presidency. So, in fact, they might actually consider voting for Trump, but may vote for Democrats down ballot. It's going to have the same exact but opposite effect that it had in 2016 against Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party. So, North Carolina, Cal Cunningham hasn't really been hurt too hard by this scandal. I don't really see going any further than this. Obviously, things can unfold. North Carolina just has had so many things happen in the Senate race, but 20 days away, Cal Cunningham is still the leader. As we look...
Yeah, certainly, I'd have to agree with him on his assessment of North Carolina. I think he also leaves out that having Roy Cooper on the ballot will help Cunningham down ballot, because I think that Cooper's going to win by a likely margin, Cunningham's going to win by a lean margin, and Biden's going to win by a tilt margin in the state. So it's really Cooper's helping Cunningham, who's helping Biden. So again, Cooper also is going to accept a lot of mail-in ballots that wouldn't otherwise be accepted had there been a Republican governor of the state, so that's also going to help them.
Looking at other battleground states, Montana, I would say, is lean for the Republicans.
I don't know about that.
Realistically, Steve Bullock isn't going to come ahead. We're still late in the game, and we haven't seen any data that has shown that he is leading in the state. He could.
To be fair to LTE, this is from a few days ago, but also, I mean, a new poll came out yesterday that put Bullock up by 2.
Surprise.
Which, again, is small. It was in the margin of error, but we're seeing data that's polls are actually starting to trend towards Bullock.
John.
It's so hypocritical.
Okay, we're going to skip through that.
When a number of other states were going red, but it's also just, I would say it's a stretch at this point to end up with 2 Democrats in a very solid Republican state. The House race is still competitive. The governor's race hasn't gone to the Republican Party in around 2 decades, so hasn't been won by the Republican Party in around 2 decades. So I will say that Montana, very weird state. I wish we get more polling out of the state, but we will probably find out in 3 weeks, at least, unless it's one of the closer races, which it has the possibility of being. But for right,
I actually think the Montana is, along with Iowa, the most toss-up-y race in the Senate. So I think it will be the second closest race behind Iowa.
Now, I'd say lean for the GOP. As we look up in the state of Maine, I'm never going to characterize it any more than lean, tilt, or toss-up in favor of the Democrats. Unless Susan Collins somehow is able to turn this race around in the final 20 days of the election cycle, I really think that she's done. Her vote to confirm Brett Kavanaugh and the tax cuts really is going to hurt her. She did not play that well. Her all but firm opposition against President Trump has not played for her well either. She has been someone who, yes, has opposed the Republican Party at certain points, but has voted with President Trump 94% of the time. The 94% number is a talking point for the Democrats up there, and it's working. Because what we saw was that Susan Collins started off with this race, winning her last race by 37% going into this one with a very strong lead, which has been chipped away at. In fact, it is now flipped to the favor of Sarah Gideon up in Maine. So we will see Maine unfold on election night. It's going to be exciting, but that race could go either way. I usually characterize it as tilt. I'm actually thinking that it goes lean for the Democrats. That's how it's been for the past couple of predictions, but still, Democrats are now at 50. So why is 50 such a significant number?
Well, that's because that's how much you need for a Senate majority if Biden wins the presidency. So going back to Maine, yeah, I agree with him. This is a lean Democratic seat. Again, Susan Collins, she isn't getting any support from really anywhere. The Democrats are mad at her because she voted to confirm Kavanaugh. A lot of the Trump-Ian Republicans, if that makes sense, they're mad at her because of the fact that I've seen people call her a rhino. There are a lot of people who just aren't happy with her votes. They say she doesn't vote with the president enough. She's not a true Republican, and they're not going to be enthusiastic about coming out for her. So, if I'm being completely honest, and she's running in a blue state in a presidential, if she was running as a Democrat in Montana, that would make more sense because, Montana, that's not a down ballot state, but Maine is pretty down ballot. So I think Susan Collins doesn't really have a chance of re-election. It'll be close because she's the incumbent, but still, this is a blue state. It's a presidential election year. Biden's going to win, and he's going to help Gideon win.
Stop at 50 a lot of the times just because this is the number that the Democrats really need if Joe Biden wins the presidency. A 50-50 tie would end up with a Vice President Kamala Harris breaking the tie in favor of the Democrats, and that would put the Democratic Party at a pretty strong position, even with 50 seats. Obviously there could be some crossover from Joe Manchin or John Tester, but Joe Manchin probably isn't running for re-election again, and John Tester still, despite voting against Kavanaugh, won his re-election bid in 2018, so he didn't have much to worry about. But all in all, the Democratic Party should be happy if they reach 50, but anywhere above 50 obviously is an absolute majority, so they could be even happier at that point. Now, for the state of Georgia, I'm thinking that the Georgia regular election could narrow up to be tilt. As it stands today, Joe Biden is now the favorite to win Georgia. I don't think that's true, but I think that this race could run very close to what the presidential race is like. And Jon Ossoff could come within striking distance of possibly winning. Now, the most recent poll from Quinnipiac University, a B-plus rated pollster, actually has Biden up 7% in Georgia. I'm going to be making a video about it later just because it's Georgia. We never see this type of lead for either candidate, realistically. And it's super close. And the Georgia Senate special election are two Senate races that the Democratic Party has a realistic shot at picking up. So I want to focus a lot of attention on those races, whether it's the House races down there or the Senate races or the presidential race, obviously. But looking at these... Looking at the state itself, I'm really excited to see the results on election night because it could be an indicator for the Democrats that they might be making inroads in the South for future elections, or they actually may not be. That's up to the voters, but I really want to see what happens in Georgia. But for the Georgia Senate special election, I'm still saying lean for the GOP, but if Kelly Loeffler...
Again, this is a hard election to analyze because of possible voter suppression happening, which if everybody, man, I do think that there will be voter suppression. You can come back after the election and quote me on that. I will be erring on the side of there is voter suppression in the state of Georgia, at least with Brian Kemp in power. And then also, Jon Ossoff is a strong campaigner, but David Perdue is still a popular senator in Georgia, and I do think that he'll run basically right with Trump. They're both going to win state by 3-4%.
There's the Republican nominee. I can't imagine that going as well as if they had chosen Doug Collins. So there are two toss-up races. We have Iowa and we have South Carolina. So the state of Iowa, I normally characterize it as GOP. It was not up until this past month that I've characterized it for the Democratic Party. Teresa Greenfield did have an okay debate performance. I'm not going to say she hit it out of the park, and I don't think Joni Ernst did either. Most of the Republican attacks that we've seen against Teresa Greenfield were that she is handpicked by Nancy Pelosi. She will bow down to Chuck Schumer. And, a lot of the times these candidates, whether they come from Republican states or not, do vote with the Democratic Party. I mean, they are Democrats before anything. But realistically, Teresa Greenfield, I will say that those attacks probably don't work too well. Because Joni Ernst went in as a candidate who was fighting against the swamp. The same thing Donald Trump did in 2016. Make him squeal. That ad was monumental. It landed her in the United States Senate. But 6 years later, she practically has nothing to show for it. And she made a lot of promises, and the people of Iowa in 2018 proved to us that they weren't just Republicans. I refer to...
By the way, in the House elections in Iowa, the average, or the combined popular vote, the Democrats won by 4%.
Iowa as a Republican state because of how...
Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm sorry that there's so many ads. It's kind of annoying.
To Donald Trump in 2016. But that is not the correct characterization of Iowa. Iowa is a toss-up state, always has been, and just has recently leaned to the right. But 2018, they ousted two Republican seats. The Republicans almost lost all four of them. And now, it looks like they're on track to carry, the Democrats are on track to carry 3 out of the 4. But in 2016, the Republicans carried 3 out of the 4. So Donald Trump may win Iowa, but Teresa Greenfield will probably do better than Joe Biden. What we see in a number of these Senate races is that these Democrats are actually outperforming Biden, but there are some exceptions where they underperform Biden. So I think Iowa, at where it stands today, is tilt for the Democrats. I'm not really going to change that. In a week from now, that could change, but for right now, I'd say Iowa is tilt for the Democrats. And for the state of South Carolina, I'm going to leave my lean characterization, but I do want to point out that this race is very close. Jamie Harrison has raised the most money we've ever seen for a Senate candidate in United States history in one quarter, $57 million. $57 million in South Carolina, a state less populous than, what, 22 other battleground states? Not battleground states, 22 other states. Looking at South Carolina, this state is very weird. I mean, I really never expected it to be competitive, and now it is competitive on the Senate level. And like,
by the way, in my first election, don't go back and watch that. It's horrible content. I literally put South Carolina as safe. I called it at poll closing for Graham and Trump.
For the GOP on the presidential level, but on the lower end of the likely spectrum. So South Carolina, very, very close. Lindsey Graham actually could lose. That's a statement. If you said that 6 months ago, again, I would have thought you were crazy. Because you would have been. 6 months ago, Graham was up 15, 16%. Today he's up 1, 2, 3%. So South Carolina, all eyes on South Carolina. It is a Republican lean. He will probably win it. It's a likely Republican seat according to 538. But we have really never seen it this close. Even in 2008, when Obama won with a number of electoral votes, 365 to be exact, flipping Indiana, making North and South Dakota competitive. Nebraska wasn't even called until later in the evening after California. So looking at South Carolina, I think that there should be a lot of media attention on an election night. And I'm honestly pretty excited as to what comes out of South Carolina in the beginning. So we will see. 51 seats for the Democrats, flips in the states of Iowa, North Carolina, Arizona, and Colorado, and Maine. The Republicans flip the state of Georgia. And practically, I believe, that is their only flip of the evening. So a net gain of 4 for the Democrats from 47 to 51.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to stop it right there. I mean, good analysis. I think that he does put a little bit too much weight on the polls. I mean, the polls are important to look at because they're a snapshot of the electorate. And I mean, like, what else are you going to use? Your gut, So polls are important to look at, but I think that putting it as lean, which I did in my last prediction, that's a bit generous towards Jamie Harrison. I mean, South Carolina, there are a lot of factors going up against him, so I think that it'll be tail end of likely 6.5% margin of victory for Lindsey Graham. So yeah, solid prediction overall. I think that Montana is at this point a pure toss-up. Same with Iowa. Although if I had to go with someone winning it, I'd bet on Greenfield. So solid prediction. Margins. I think Georgia, he's being a little too generous to Ossoff. I think it's a lean Republican seat. I think South Carolina is a likely Republican seat. But other than that, solid prediction. So yeah. Again, please like the video, subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you enjoyed this. I haven't figured out how to fix the echo, so this is kind of annoying. I tried switching mics, didn't do anything, but that's it, guys. Thanks for watching this video. See you all in the next one. Interesting new video talking about landslides coming out soon.